The Prime Minister. How awkward! After his triumphant last elections, he was found deteriorating physically, and his closest friends and kin were worried, asking him to be examined. But the doctors could not find the fault. But finally, an expert in South Africa resolved the mystery and diagnosed him with a new disease that was incurable, of an immunity disorder syndrome. Yes, he had been rather active sexually. His wife had twice tried to divorce him, but the situation now was critical for a prime minister and head of his own party that had been in power for most of the century, in a firm establishment that could not tolerate a scandal that would ruin both the party and establishment. So something had to be arranged. What did they do? They had to their disposal all the national resources, the police force, the security and money to pay any silence, so they made of him a martyr for the party, faking an assassination in the middle of the city when he and his wife went home after a cinema. And all the king's men kept their silence for the sake of the establishment. The leading officer of the investigation was himself a homosexual, leading the tremendous bluff, deceiving all the country, that was shocked at the atrocious death of such a perfect and ideal prime minister, who only had been whisked away to spend his long, pathetic, awkward death in splendid and protected isolation, comfortably in one of the 14 castles of the Rothschilds far away in France. Transcending time dimensions. There is no time, and I'm out of time, but there's no bother, I don't mind, since I'm out of time and do not care about the right time, since the limitation of the stress of time is to be ignored as just a nuisance, while the time dimension is most relative, if anything, and I prefer the presence of all time dimensions to the limitation of the present time. All history is still alive, no matter how antique. It's always present, now affecting all the present, as the present is but a result of it. And the better we are masters of the past, caretaking of its knowledge and traditions, the more capable and fit we are creating, making something of the future. The Poet by Khalil Gibran. This is one of my favorite poems of Khalil Gibran's, and I think it should have a place here. He is a link between this and the coming world. He is a pure spring from which all thirsty souls may drink. He is a tree watered by the river of beauty, bearing fruit which the hungry heart craves. He is a nightingale soothing the depressed spirit with his beautiful melodies. He is a white cloud appearing over the horizon, ascending and growing until it fills the face of the sky. Then it falls on the flows in the field of life, opening their petals to admit the light. Is an angel sent by the goddess to preach the deity's gospel. Is a brilliant lamp unconquered by darkness and inextinguishable by the wind. It is filled with oil by Ishtar of love and lighted by Apollon of music. Is a solitary figure robed in simplicity and kindness. He sits upon the lap of nature to draw his inspiration and stays up in the silence of the night, awaiting the descending of the Spirit. Is a sower who sows the seeds of his heart in the prairies of affection, and humanity reaps the harvest for her nourishment. This is the poet whom the people ignore in this life, and who is recognized only when he bids the earthly world farewell and returns to his arbor in heaven. This is the poet who asks naught of humanity but a smile. This is the poet whose spirit ascends and fills the firmament with beautiful sayings, yet the people deny themselves his radiance. Until when shall the people remain asleep? Until when shall they continue to glorify those who attain greatness by moments of advantage? How long shall they ignore those who enable them to see the beauty of their spirit, symbol of peace and love? Until when shall human beings honor the dead and forget the living, who spend their lives encircled in misery, and who consume themselves like burning candles to illuminate the way for the ignorant and lead them into the path of light? Poet, you are the life of this life, and you have triumphed over the ages of despite their severity. Poet, you will one day rule the hearts, and therefore your kingdom has no ending. Poet, examine your crown of thorns. You will find concealed in it a budding wreath of laurel. Problems of unbearable melancholy. They are always there, the remnants of the past, the ruins, the defeats and failures, ghosts and phantoms of all those you lost, old classmates who went under in alcoholism or died in cancer or in traffic accidents, leaving behind a hangover of eternal pain, and worst of all, betrayals, shortcomings, and the irreparable loss, destruction and affliction in the bleeding heart wounds of injustice. Is all that you can do then just to weep over the ruins, like a Jeremiah, and complaining to eternity of all that happened that went hopelessly and cruelly wrong? No, if there is no other comfort in your old age, you can always keep on working till your death, and just keep carrying on until you die, and then at least you have done your best until the end. But there is something else as well. Your memories keep burdening and crowding down on you the more the older you survive in spite of all. And all those memories are not all bad and bitter. The best memories survive the best, and here's the cue. You can go on collecting new ones. There are no restrictions, and should be no end to them, and that should be enough for you to keep on struggling on. Outhärdlig melankoli. Det är alltid där, ruinerna av det förflutna, misslyckandena, förlusterna och nederlagen, vålnader och spöken av det hedangångna och förlorade, som klasskamrater som gick under i alkoholism, som dog i cancer eller i trafikolyckor, kvarlämnande baksmällor av evig smärta och det värsta, svek, förräderier och förintelser i den ohjälpliga och destruktiva orättvisans hjärtesår som måste blöda och förblöda ständigt oupphörligt. Är allt man kan göra då att gråta vid ruinerna som en Jeremias med evinnerliga jämmerliga klagovisor över allt som gick så fruktansvärt och hopplöst fel? Nej, om det ej finns någon annan tröst på gamla dagar, så kan man alltid hålla på och arbeta ändå och sträva vidare och streta tills man dör, och så åtminstone ha gjort sitt bästa till det bittra slutet. Men där föreligger även något annat. Dina minnen plågar och besvärar och belastar dig, och det står mera tungt ju mer du envisas att överleva, men det är ej enbart dåliga och bittra minnen. Dina bästa minnen överlever bäst och längst, och här är tipset. Du kan fortsätta att samla nya. Det finns inga restriktioner eller gränser, och det borde vara alldeles tillräckligt för att du ska fortsätta att hålla på och sträva vidare. Fondling memories. What are they for? All those sweet memories of yore that always keep pursuing you and never leave you quite alone. The perfumes of forgotten pleasures, silenced voices that you keep on hearing, dreams of beauty and intimacy that never quite materialized. The songs that never could be silenced, and the deaths that never were convincing. All the laughs that sparkled for eternity, the warmth of tenderness and feelings of eternal love, what are they for, if not to be maintained and cherished, cultivated and enriched, to never cease in glowing splendor, to be proven, like ourselves, immortal in the truth of their sincerity and genuineness. Minnesvård. Vad är det till för, alla dessa ljuva gamla minnen, vars förföljelse man aldrig helt blir av med och som aldrig någonsin kan lämna en i fred, som dofterna av glömda nöjen, röster som har tystnat men som ändå förblir levande, och drömmar av intimitet och skönhet som ej någonsin blev helt fullbordade, med sångerna som aldrig kunde tystna helt och alla avlidna som aldrig kunde övertyga med sin död, som alla skratt som sprudlade med evighetens kraft, den varma ömheten och känslan av en kärleks evighet. Vad är det alla till för, och mig för att vårdas ömt och underhållas, odlas, kultiveras och berikas kontinuerligt, för att aldrig någonsin förlora prakten i sin glöd, för att bevisas, alldeles liksom vi själva, av odödlig karaktär i sanningen av deras innerliga äkthet. Nobility. There is no such thing as noble blood, no honorable ancestry, no great ennobling ancient traditions, stories of great quests and glories of the past, that in any way would leave a lasting mark of individual and personal nobility, which only can be spiritual. If you are noble, you are born spiritually with it. That stamp is of eternity. It is a stain you can't wash off, but are obliged to carry on and cultivate and carry further. Spirituality, of course, is most arguable and controversial. Many see it as a hubris, arrogance, presumption, and a most impractical irrationality. But if it's in your spirit, there is nothing you can do to help it except being true to that nobility of soul, a legacy received and carried out as something of a heritage out of eternity, and usually it is combined with some advanced philosophy. Philosophers were usually regarded with suspicion, disbelief, disdain, and more or less discriminated as outsiders, pariahs, outlaws, and abnormal aliens. But philosophy is nothing but the love and adherence to wisdom, and if there is anything this monstrous and derailed humanity stands in urgent need of, it is the philosophy of a detachment from the aberrations of the human mainstream of irrationality. And only the nobility of alien philosophy can differ properly between eternal values and all mortal vanity. Förädling. Det finns inget edelt blod, ej något adligt edelt släktskap, ingenting förädlande i anors traditioner. Händelser och bragder som på något sätt i det förflutna kunde lämna någon edel prägel som ett adelsmärke av bestående validitet för något individuellt, personligt, outplånligt särdrag genom släktled efter släktled, då ett adelsmärke bara kan bestå i själen som ett andligt gods. Om man är edel är man född som sådan i sin ande med den evighetens stämpel stämpel som man aldrig kan bli av med, men som kräver att man vidmakthåller den och kultiverar den. Naturligtvis är andligheten alltid något kontroversiellt och diskutabelt som kan ses och missförstås och tolkas som förmätenhet och hybris, arrogans och övermod och ofta ses som något av en opraktisk irrationalitet. Men om det finns i själen är det inte mycket man kan göra utom att ta vara på belastningen och vara trogen dess förpliktelser. Ett arv av evigheten att förvalta, utveckla och föra vidare, och ofta är det kombinerat med en avancerad filosofisk läggning. Filosofer har betraktats vanligen med skepsis och misstänksamhet, diskriminerade som abnormala främlingar och hopplösa utbölingar. Men filosofi är bara kärleken och troheten till visheten. Och om vår urspårade monstruösa mänsklighet behöver något är det väl filosofins distansierande från mänsklighetens dårskap och irrationella masspsykos i ständiga politiska förförelser. Och bara upphöjd, edel och distanserad klok filosofi kan alltid göra skillnad mellan fåfängans förgänglighet och det som är av evigt edelt värde. The rule of tragedy. It's a universal law of life that everything alive is ruled by tragedy. By suffering, all life is tragic, and this fact is best observed by everything that's going on in nature. Man cannot escape it. He is not exempt. His penchant for illusions and delusions cannot help him. In the end, he must accept the fact that everything is but a tragedy, and his only cure and remedy for this is to accept it, face the facts, and stare reality in death's own grinning face, embrace it, and submit to the ordeal of having to subordinate to the oblique reality of tragedy as the irrevocable frame and limitation to his life, his personality, and all existence. Tragedin som livets lag. Det är livets egen universella lag, att allting levande är tragiskt, att allt liv är lidande, att livet domineras av ett tragiskt element, och detta faktum märks mest i naturen. Människan kan inte komma undan det. Hans fallenhet för illusioner och självbedrägerier kan ej hjälpa honom. Oavlåtligt måste han till slut förstå och acceptera att allt bara är en tragedi. Och hans enda lindring i den hopplösheten är att acceptera dess realitet och se den rakt i vitögat och omfatta dess dödsgrins obenhörlighet och böja sig för oundvikligheten i dess lag att allting bara är en smärtsam bitter tragedi som livets ofrånkomliga begränsning av all existens, av allt personligt och allt liv. Integrity. Don't let yourself be bothered and struck down in worries and depression by the fallacies of others and their weakness. Don't look back on shipwrecks and defeats, but go on marching forward, following your path, and conscience in all weathers and whatever happens. Your life is your own initiative. That is your strength and leadership, and no one else has any right to interfere with it or block it. That is your divinity and sparkle, which it is your greatest duty to maintain and carry forward, and as far as possible as your most sacred right of inviolability. Integritet. Låt dig inte bli betryckt och nedtryckt, nedslagen i depressioners ängslighet och oro, av tillkortakommanden och nederlag hos andra, genom eventuella svagheter i deras karaktärer, genom brister och inkonsekvenser. Gå förbi vad det har brustit genom nederlag och skeppsbrott. Fortsätt rakt fram på din egen väg istället, följandes ditt samvete i alla väder och vad som än händer. Ditt liv är ditt eget initiativ, det är din styrka och ditt ledarskap, som ingen annan äger rätt att avbryta och sabotera. Det är din gudomlighet och gudagnista som det är din främsta plikt att vidmakthålla samt att föra vidare så långt som möjligt som din heligaste, okränkbara rätt. Passing shadows. From this world and into another goes this guesswork of a lifetime, passing all kinds of mysterious shadows, like a fickle shadow of a mystery itself, of no great consequence, only for a treat, to dwindle slowly into nothingness as its true basic element. It is just something to endure, and when it's over you are free to start again from the beginning, as a fresh start as but yet another passing shadow. The Bachelor. There was nothing wrong with him. He had good looks and no diseases, no impediment to his abilities, but he was never any womanizer and had no luck with women, as they always turned him down. He made proposals that were constantly refused. If he had a girlfriend, she requested him for money, and if he was in love and faithful as a lover, she betrayed him and went lying with another. He finally drew the conclusion that the only good girls he had ever known were those who never had asked him for money, and they were invariably older than himself. So he became established as a bachelor, but there was never something lacking in his love, but on the contrary, the more he was refused, turned down, betrayed, and disillusioned about women, the more constantly and earnestly he loved. Your best friend. Who is your best friend? He is always there waiting for you. He will never leave you, for as long as you will stay alive, since he will always need you, being constantly dependent on you. When you are deserted by your other friends, when life will only thwart and bring you bad luck, when personal disasters and catastrophes will overwhelm you by their towering adversity and make an outrage of your life, with even love deserting you by treason, leaving you betrayed and bankrupt, robbed and devastated and reduced to nothing, you will still have one friend left, who constantly will wait for you to take him on again, resuming and renewing your most favoured project, which is simply your own work, and all that major part of it that only you did master. Skyggheten. Jag var alltid rädd för människorna, då jag från början lärde mig att jag ej kunde lita på dem, vilket var min svåraste besvikelse i livet, som mycket tidigt separerade mig från vanligt mänskligt liv i allmänhet. Jag blev en enstöring från början, som lärde sig självständighet och oberoende som enda sättet till att kunna arbeta med vad jag ville göra och var funtad för, i ostörd isolering helst, och därför ensamhet, som därför blev mitt vanligaste levnadselement. Som sådan lärde jag mig även ödmjukhet och att i filosofiskt sund distans betrakta verkligheten med en desto större kärlek och fördjupad ansvarskänsla, i en empati med allting levande, mer innerlig i odlandet av känslighetens universalism och insikt. Därför blev mitt arbete min huvudsakliga resurs, som glädje, trygghet, kreativitet och mening med mitt liv. Det där är något skryt, men blott ett ödmjukt konstaterande och något av en ursäkt för min ständiga resignation från allt vad allmänheten bryr sig om och bråkar om, då ingenting är mera välgörande än privat meditation. shyness. I always shied from people out of oversensitivity and fear, since I from the beginning learned the hard way that I never could trust anyone, which was the worst disappointment of my life, which separated me from ordinary human life quite early, making me from the beginning a recluse and outsider, who had to manage on his own in independence as the only way to save my possibility to work with what I was most qualified to do in undisturbed and isolated loneliness, which thus became my main life's element. As such, I also learned the benefits of absolute humility, and to in sound and philosophical detachment regard reality with deeper love and more profound responsibility, in deepened empathy with all things living, in the cultivation of the universalism of sincerest sensitivity. That's how my work became my life's predominant resource, as my security and creativity, my joy and my life's meaning. I intend no boast, but wish to humbly only state the facts, as something of an excuse and apology for my consistent resignation from all matters of contention among ordinary people, of concerns with mundane, vain and mortal interests, since there's nothing that can be more beneficial and rewarding than just basic private meditation. Post-traumatic stress syndrome. What can you do when everything is ruined, when your life is devastated, as you find yourself let down by everybody, and there's nothing left but tears and misery and poverty, as bankruptcy is a reality and there is no way out? The post-traumatic stress syndrome, once it is there, will never leave you any more in peace, but will be permanent as something of a hangover that you will never quite be rid of, like a phantom as the old man of the sea that Simbad never quite could shake off from his shoulders, as a nightmare without end and monster of outrageous cruelty to never offer any remedy except the cowardly escape of suicide, which is the worst, most desperate and unacceptable solution. You must live with it, there is no other way, and if you cannot battle it and deal with it in any other way, then there is still the option to give in and wallow in its constant torture. The abyss. When everything is lost, you will resort to anything, and even to acknowledging your ultimate defeat, as a justification for your throwing in the towel to the deadliest of mortal sins of giving up. But what else can you do? When your beloved has proved only your destruction in the abyss of a permanent betrayal, horribly consistent in its meanness of outrageous viciousness, and leaving you with nothing left but staring into the black hole of your despair, in utter hollowness of your existence, as the most pathetic of all fools, deceived by most of all yourself. You cannot even cry because your tears are dry, while the worst of all is how you are condemned to stay on and go on in spite of all, surviving your destruction and annihilation in a sentence worse than death, to be condemned to stay alive.